Story number 1. My daughter's costume won't come off, and it's still breathing. The first thing that felt wrong was the sound the costume made when my daughter exhaled. Not the soft kid breath you hear when a child is excited and talking too fast. This was deeper, wetter, like air moving through something damp. She laughed and said she could hear herself inside the mask. I told her it was just the echo. We'd bought the costume that afternoon because I forgot to order the one she wanted. The store was picked clean. Last aisle, last size, a cheap polyester forest spirit with a hood and a pale, stitched-on smile. The tag said 8 to 10. She's 9. Perfect, I said, even though the fabric felt oddly cold, like it had been sitting in a freezer. She wriggled into it while I chopped apples for caramel. Look, Dad. She spun, branches printed along the sleeves, plastic leaves sewn around the collar. The zipper ran from the small of her back to the crown of the hood, so the hood hugged her cheeks when I pulled it up. Hold still, I said, pinching the tiny metal tab. The zipper went up smooth, too smooth, like it wanted to be closed. She breathed in, and the hood tightened a little. I told myself it was elastic. By the time the sun dropped, the neighborhood was full of kids. My daughter skipped down the walk with flashlight like a sword. Every house smelled like damp leaves and sugar. It was normal, fun, loud. I tried to ignore that other breathy sound, the one I kept hearing when she laughed. Halfway down the block, she stopped and scratched at the seam under her jaw. It's itchy, she said. I reached to pull the hood back and couldn't get a grip. The fabric slid under my fingers like eel skin. She squirmed, annoyed. Dad, you're pulling my hair. Okay, I said, letting go. We'll take it off at home. After the cul-de-sac loop, her bag was full and her steps were heavy. My face is sweaty, she said, voice muffled. I told her 2 more houses. That's when the porch camera buzzed my phone with motion alerts from our door, even though no one was there. Just a short clip of the dark entryway and the sound of that same breath, closer, like someone right up against the lens. Back home, I set the candy bowl on the counter and turned on the light over the sink. Arms up, I said, moving behind her. I slid my thumb under the zipper tab and pulled. It didn't move. I tried again, harder. The tab bent like it was made of tin. My daughter rolled her shoulders. Ow! Sorry, it stuck. She swiped at her cheek. It's itchy inside my mouth. What? She opened her mouth under the hood. I felt the shape through the fabric, her lips, her nose, pressed me when I reached to steady her head. Hot breath warmed my palm, but the air I felt coming out of the cloth was cool. The hood rose and fell with a slow rhythm, not matching the quick little huffs she made when she giggled. Hold your breath, I said. She did. Her chest stilled. The hood kept breathing. I laughed. It came out thin. Static. My hands warm, that's all. She nodded, accepting that because I was her dad, and I was supposed to make sense. I sat her on a stool and fetched scissors from the junk drawer. The knives were in the dishwasher. Don't move. I slid one blade under the neck seam. The fabric resisted. Not thick, not tough, just slippery. The scissors skated and squeaked like I was trying to cut a soap bubble. Dad, she said, voice smaller. I don't like it anymore. Almost done. The doorbell rang. Trick-or-treaters. I ignored it. My phone buzzed again. Another motion alert. I told myself it was the wind. Try to pull the sleeves down. I said, we'll wiggle it off. She pulled. The sleeves gathered and creaked around her wrists. I could see the print stretch like bark. She cried out and snatched her hands back. There were red lines on her skin, like the fabric had teeth. I got mad then, not at her, at the stupid cheap costume, at myself for being careless. I grabbed the seam under her chin and yanked. The hood slid up a 1/4 inch and snapped back, harder than elastic should. "Stop," she said. "It's pulling from inside." "What do you mean?" "It's in my hair." She sounded embarrassed, like she'd said something silly. I tilted her head toward the light and tried to peer into the edge of the hood where it met her jaw. The inside wasn't the same pale print as the outside. It was darker, wet-looking. A smell rose up, sweet-sour, like an old sponge you find in the sink. I told her to close her eyes. I took the paring knife from the sink, not caring it was still damp from the rinse. I slid the tip under the seam and angled up. She flinched. The fabric shivered around the blade, and the knife moved, not out of my hand, but sideways, guided. It traced a little curve and then stopped dead. I pushed. Something under the cloth pushed back. I pulled the knife out, hand shaking now. I put on my best fake calm voice. "We're going to the DR." "It's Halloween," she whispered, as if we'd be in trouble for leaving. Then, "Dad?" I can hear it breathing. "I know," I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes were visible through the fabric, 2 darker ovals. As I stared, the stitched-on smile lifted subtly, like someone was pressing a thumb from the inside. The seams around the mouth flexed. The leaves at her collar rustled even though the kitchen was still. The doorbell rang again. Then again, impatient. The Ring camera sent another alert. I thumbed it open to tell them to take candy from a bowl. The live view was crooked, like the camera had been tilted. The porch was empty. The audio was full of that damp breathing. I turned the phone face down. "Dad," she said, voice wobbling. "It's scratching my throat." I scooped her up. She was too big for that now, but light in that moment, all angles and tremble. I carried her to the bathroom and set her on the rug. I locked the door. I thought steam might loosen it. I turned the shower all the way to hot and waited until the mirror fog in the room felt like a sauna. "Lean in," I told her, guiding her head under the warm mist. She did, obedient, glassy-eyed. Condensation beaded on the hood. Tiny droplets formed and ran, but none soaked into the material. It stayed matte, dry to the touch, breathing slow. The bathroom fan clicked on. I hadn't hit the switch. Behind us, something tapped on the mirror from the wrong side. 1, 2, 3. Not hard. Curious. I didn't turn. I pressed the flat of my hand to the hood and spoke to the place where I thought her ear was. "I'm going to cut it again. You're going to cough. It's okay." "Okay," she said, brave, trusting me. I slid the knife in. This time it went. A thin line opened, and a sound came out that wasn't a cough or a cry. It was relief, like a long inhale after being underwater too long. The slit widened on its own. The dark inside of the hood pulsed, wet, and the stitched-on smile widened to match. I yanked her back, and the cut sealed, smooth, leaving my knife blade sticky with something clear and stringy. She gagged and pawed at her mouth. Her breath hitched. The hood's breath didn't. I dropped the knife in the sink and turned off the shower. The sudden quiet made the breathing louder, like it had been waiting for silence. Slow, patient. "Dad," she whispered. "Don't be mad." I took it from the basket by the register. The sign said free. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, stupidly hurt and relieved at the same time, like this was normal trouble we could fix with a lecture. When I opened them, the bathroom door's shadow had changed. It bulged around the frame, as if someone leaned against it from the hall and put their mouth to the gap. The breath on the other side matched the hood's rhythm exactly. I scooped her again. We ran for the garage. The door stuttered as it rolled up, jerking in little stops like the motor was choking. Night air rushed in, cold and leaf-sweet. I strapped her into the car with shaking hands. and the hood turned its stitched smile toward me like a sunflower following the sun. I drove. I didn't look in the rear view. At the first red light, she said, "Small, it's quieter when you don't look." I kept my eyes on the road. We made it to the ER. The waiting room was Halloween crowded. Glitter, fake blood, tired parents. I told the triage nurse my daughter couldn't get her costume off. The nurse smiled at first. Then she leaned in and frowned. "What's that sound?" We got a room. A doctor came. He tried the zipper. He tried scissors. He said words like adhesive and reaction, while the hood breathed in and out like it was thinking. He wanted to get help. We waited. The overhead light hummed. Through the paper curtain, I heard carts and voices, and under it all, that slow, wet breath from every direction at once, like the entire building had lungs. My daughter took my hand and squeezed. "If they take it off," she said, almost asleep, "where will it go?" I didn't answer. Across the room, the biohazard bin's lid lifted a fraction, then settled. Plastic creaked. The sound below it was careful, learning to be quiet. It's been 3 days. They sedated her. Specialist consults. They said, at night, the baby monitor they gave us to watch her oxygen picks up sounds when she's not moving. It's not the beeps. It's not her. It's a soft, steady rhythm that doesn't change when she holds her breath in her sleep. I watched the little green bar bounce up and down on the screen in the darkroom, and I try not to breathe with it. Right now, as I write this in the chair beside her bed, the monitor shows my daughter's oxygen is fine. The room is quiet, but the laundry bin behind the curtain is rising and falling slowly, like something inside it is practicing. Next story title is, I took a Halloween job in a town that vanished overnight. The job posting didn't have a website, just a number and 3 rules. Bring cash to the room, no photos during your shift, and if the church bell rings, don't look at the steeple. I called because I needed money, and because rules like that feel like dares when you've been sleeping in your truck. A woman with a tired voice told me the town was called Hallows Run. GPS won't find it, she said. Follow Route 19 until the cornfields start, then take the road with the orange ribbon. Check in at the motel office before 6. The road with the orange ribbon wasn't a sign. It was a literal ribbon tied to a fence post, dark as dried blood. Past it, the air changed. You know that cold that sits behind your nose right before you get sick? Like that. The corn leaned in a little. The smell of creosote, wet leaves, diesel, and something sweet like burned sugar. Hallows Run sat low in a shallow bowl. Hand-painted signs, a diner with a flickering neon coffee cup, a white-steepled church with windows so clean they looked like holes, and a motel with 6 doors and a plastic skeleton in the office chair. The clerk slid me a key and a manila envelope with vest/pay written on it. The vest was orange with reflective tape, still damp. The envelope also had cash. Old bills. Coins dull as river stones. "You're on the hayride," the clerk said. "Start at 7. Finish at midnight. Do not let anyone off the wagon. Do not stop under the steeple. If the bell rings, eyes down. What happens if—" He looked at me like I'd asked how knives work. "Don't." The manager at the hayride was a man with hands like wood, and a radio he wore on a string around his neck. He smelled like what straw and cigarettes. He said my name once, and then never again, just driver. He walked me through the route. You'll circle the square, take Elm, past the school, cross the bridge, into the orchard, back to square. If anyone asks to get off, wave at me and keep going. Even kids. Especially kids. The wagon was real hay and splinters. The tractor coughed when it started, and a cloud of diesel rolled over us. My vest clung to my neck like another hand. I kept touching it, feeling dampness that didn't go away. By 7, the square was packed. Pumpkins on every step. Jack-o'-lanterns with careful smiles and two deep eyes. People in costumes you'd expect. Witch hats, werewolves, a ghost with two black eye holes. But the masks looked old, stitched, not plastic. The air was sugar and smoke. The church bell was quiet. I drove. The wagon creaked, and everyone did that hayride laugh, loud and nervous. A kid in a skeleton hoodie touched the bales with both hands and whispered, "Real!" like he couldn't believe it. A woman in a fox mask sat alone, hands folded, and watched my shoulders instead of the street. We passed a school, brick, windows black, the bridge with planks, river below not moving, the orchard, rows and rows of shapes under frost. Every time we neared the church, the air cooled 3 degrees, and my eyes wanted to lift. I kept them on the road. It put a pressure at the back of my neck that made my teeth itch. On the second loop, a little girl tapped the back of my arm. I didn't hear her come up. "Mister," she said through a paper cat mask, "can I get off? My house is right there." She pointed at a small blue place with a porch swing that moved though there was no wind. "Wave at the manager." I said, "Doing what I was told." She did. He didn't look. Next loop, "Elite." She stood beside me anyway. I could hear her breath, ragged, like she'd run. "If the bell rings," she said, "don't look." "I know," I said. "You'll still want to," she said, and for a second I thought she sounded like someone older wearing a child's mouth. By 10, the town felt too practiced. The same people on porches, the same hand lifted the same way. The jack-o'-lantern smiled with the exact same amount of candlelight, no matter how long the flame burned. A radio at the diner counter played a song I hadn't heard since I was a kid, and then it played again and then again. When we crossed the bridge, something under the planks clicked along with the tractor tires like a dog trotting underneath us. At 11:58, the radio on the manager's string crackled, and the voice that came through was mine. "Driver," it said, exactly how I say my own name when I make a joke out of it. "Under no circumstances stop at the steeple." The manager slapped the radio like that would knock my voice out of it. "Batteries," he said to me like an apology, but the radio wasn't on. I could see the dead screen. At midnight, the bell rang. It didn't ring 12 times. It rang once, long, like someone had dropped away inside the tower and never hauled it up again. The sound didn't come from above me. It came from inside my chest. My eyes tried to go up. I kept them on the tractor's hood. The metal was dusted with straw, and the straw shook with the vibration of the bell. The little girl beside me dug her fingers into my vest. "Don't look," she whispered, and then she looked. Her head tipped back like a puppet's. I didn't see the steeple. I saw her cat mask tilt to the ceiling of sky. I saw the edge of the paper touch her eyebrows and then sink like wet fabric. Her breath hitched once, like a hiccup. The bell stopped. She lowered her head. The mask didn't. "Home," she said, voice too flat. I drove. I didn't stop at her blue house. I didn't stop at all. The manager's hand lifted. I didn't wave. I made the loop, then another, then took a right I wasn't supposed to take, and followed my headlights out to the motel. The skeleton still sat in the office chair. The neon coffee cup steam blinked. On, never off. I locked my door and put the vest on a chair and sat on the bed until the bed felt like it was moving around me. Sometime after that, I slept. At 6:07 a.m., I woke to a quiet, so complete it sounded like a noise. My phone had service again. I opened the curtain, and the town was gone. Not empty. Gone. Where the square had been was flattened grass, and 2 foundation rectangles like tan lines on the earth. The church steeple was a single beam blackened at the top, as if it had burned a long time ago, and then thought better of it. The motel office door hung open, and there was no chair. The coffee cup sign was dead glass. My truck sat where I'd parked it. My tires were clean. No mud. My vest on the chair was dry now and smelled like someone had dried it near a fire. I drove with my heart too high in my throat until I found a gas station with a real person inside. I asked the clerk if there was a town called Hallows Run out past cornfields. He said there hadn't been a town out there since the hayride burned in 1913. He said this like he was telling me about a storm from yesterday. I went back with a county deputy, who agreed to humor the crazy seasonal worker. We stood where the square should be and heard nothing but insects. He asked me to show him. I tried. My footprints made a jittery circle in damp grass. The deputy looked at my pay envelope. He rolled one coin in his fingers and then didn't roll it anymore. "You keep this?" he asked. "It was in my room when I checked in," I said, and I could hear how false that sounded even with the truth standing up in my mouth. He told me to get in and leave it alone. He said the word trespassing because it was easier than the word we didn't have. That night my phone buzzed with a number that had no digits. "Shift confirmed," the text said. "Hayride, 7 to 12. A map pin dropped onto a blank stretch of county road. And when I tapped, my phone camera opened by itself and showed me my face and a square of dark behind me and the corner of an orange vest moving like it was breathing. I took the job for one night. The town took the date. Now every October, I hear the bell, even if I'm 1,000 miles away. It rings from the closet or the radio or the hollow of my own ribs, and a map pin appears. And if I don't go, my vest moves on the back of the chair until it stands up to leave without me. Title: The babysitter's costume matched the dead woman in our attic, ChatGPT said. The first wrong thing was that she showed up already in costume. Most babysitters change after the kids sleep. Throw on a hoodie, eat our snacks, text their friends. She rang the bell at 6:58 p.m. with a paper grocery bag and a smile and that long black dress that dragged just a little on the steps. It made a soft sound, like dry leaf being pushed along by a broom. "Hi, I'm Lydia," she said. Her lipstick was the same dark red my wife keeps and never wears. The dress had a high collar and a row of tiny pearl buttons that ran straight up her throat. Her hair was pinned tight, too neat for a teenager on Halloween. "You didn't need to," I started, gesturing at the dress. "It's festive," she said, and stepped past me like she already knew the layout. The kids were vibrating. Sugar, excitement, the whole neighborhood outside, yelling and laughing. My wife came down the stairs adjusting an earring and stopped on the bottom step, staring. The dress, the color, the buttons. We didn't say anything, not then. You don't tell a stranger. You look like the woman who died up there. We went to that attic once when we moved in. Everyone in town knew the story the real estate agent didn't want to say out loud. Previous owner, elderly, fell through the ladder opening at the top. She lived alone. One of those quiet deaths that the house keeps until the smell tells on it. Happened years ago, the agent said. All clean professionally. They left the attic ladder in, like a tooth that never got pulled. "We won't be late," my wife told Lydia. "Bed at 8. He gets scared of the window," she added, nodding at our son. Lydia crouched at the kid's level and said, "Well, keep the curtains closed." Her eyes were so calm the kids calmed with them. We left into orange light and fake fog. I kept checking my phone like a nervous teenager myself. Nothing from Lydia. No questions about snacks or Wi-Fi. At 8:12, I texted, "Everything okay?" No answer. My wife said I was being paranoid. At 8:30, we turned early onto our street. The porch light was on. Through the front window, I could see the TV's blue flicker. The house smelled wrong when we walked in. Not bad, just old. Cabinets and starch. My grandmother's church clothes. The kind of clean that hide something. The kids were on the couch, drowsy under a blanket, a bowl of candy between them. Lydia sat upright in the chair beside the stairs, hands folded on her lap. Her dress didn't have a wrinkle. "How were they?" my wife asked. "They're good," Lydia said. Her voice was soft, like she practiced each word before saying it. "What's in the bag?" I asked to say anything. "Candy for later," she said. "You said 8. The wall clock ticked louder than usual. The furnace kicked on, and the vent near the stairs breathed warm. "We'll walk you out," I said. "We like to pay in cash at the door." My wife went to get her purse. I went to the closet for my coat and caught my sleeve on something. The attic string hung lower than it should, swaying a little. The ladder door, flush with the ceiling above the stairs, didn't look separate anymore. The paint matched too well. "You go up there?" I asked without looking at her. Lydia turned her head slowly. I didn't need to. My skin prickled like a bad draft had found me. At the door, when I handed her the money, she didn't take it right away. "You still hear her sometimes?" she asked. My wife closed her fist around the bills. "We don't." Lydia tilted her head, listening to air. "It's in the walls," she said. "You think it's mice?" "We had an exterminator," I said, stupidly defensive. "Okay," Lydia said and smiled, and the smile looked heavy on her face, like it belonged to someone else. "I should go." She stepped out into the leaf-slicked porch and turned left instead of right, toward the side of the house with the basement windows. My wife and I watched her go, because neither of us wanted to be the first to speak. When I finally shut the door, the house sounded too full. The clock, the vents, the tiny noises it makes when it remembers it's not a tree. The kids breathed slow on the couch. "Do you think—" My wife started and stopped. She looked like I said and didn't finish. The photo from the old newspaper article flashes up in my head sometimes when I'm in the attic pulling out Christmas stuff. Black and white. A woman in a high-collared dress you'd only wear if someone told you had to. The same buttons. The same too-even hair. We got the kids upstairs. Brushed teeth. Argued about one more page of a book. Our daughter asked why the lady wore a church costume. Our son asked if we could lock the ceiling. We said goodnight. I pulled the cord on the blinds and felt better when the slats snapped shut. At 10:41, after my wife fell asleep with a headphone half in, I heard the ladder creak. You know the sound every part of your house makes after a while. The fridge settling. The water heater sighing. This was wood on wood. Small, close. The kind of creak a rung makes when weight tests it. I lay there and tried to make it a branch on the roof, a neighbor's door, anything. It came again. Not from above us. From the hall, where the ladder would unfold if someone pulled the string. I got up, careful not to wake her. The hall was a dim stripe of nightlight. The attic door was just a rectangle of darker darkness in the ceiling. The pull string hung still. I stood under it and held my breath. Behind me, our daughter said, "She's standing on your side of the bed." My heart jumped like a fish. I turned. My daughter stood in her doorway, hair pushed up on one side, one sock on. I wanted to tell her to go back to sleep. I wanted to be the adult who says, "There's no one there." Instead, I went back into the room, flicked on a lamp, and squinted at my side of the bed. Empty clothes on the chair. Phone on the nightstand, face down. No one. "Bad dream," I said, forcing lightness. She stared at the floor beside the bed, and then up at me, confused, like the world had moved when she wasn't looking. "She's wearing the church dress," she said. "Her feet are wrong." "What do you mean?" "Pointing the wrong way," she whispered, and her lips started to shake. I took her back to her room and lay down beside her until her breath evened out. The house settled in small clicks. I kept my eyes on the crack of light under the door. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a message from a number I didn't know. No name, no bubbles, just a photo, grainy, like it was taken in the dark without a flash. The angle was from above, looking down at our living room, the kids' blanket still on the couch, the bowl of candy on the table, a faint shape in the chair by the stairs. Black dress, hands folded. I felt the bed dip just a fraction, like someone leaned a hip against it. Cold air pushed under the blanket, down by my shins, the way it does when someone lifts the edge to get in. I didn't look right away. I kept my eyes on the soft blue glow from the night light and listened. Upstairs, no, not upstairs, above us, but now on the next floor, the wood made a small, careful sound like a foot testing a board. Then another, then the tiniest rasp, fabric on wood, something long trailing. My wife whispered from the doorway, "Who did you hire?" And her voice had the kind of tightness that makes your stomach drop. "I didn't," I said. She texted from the neighborhood group. She had references. It sounded thin in the air. Another buzz. Another photo. This time our stairs. Taken from the middle of them, looking up at the ceiling. The attic door framed in the shot. A hand barely visible in the corner. Fingers thin, nails neat. The pull string tangled around an index finger, like a ring. The house exhaled. The light in the hall pulsed once, dimmer, like something big had stepped between it and us. I got up. I don't know why. Stupidity, denial, the script of being the dad. I went into the hall and stood under the attic door and reached up, even though my arms didn't want to. I touched the string. It was warm. Something on the other side of the panel leaned down, close enough that it would carry a small tap-tap, like a forehead touching it twice the line up. I could smell starch and old perfume. My fingers shook. I pulled the string just to prove it was paint and hinges and gravity. The panel swung down an inch on its own, gentle, like something on top of it had risen to make room. I pressed it back up, and the pressure pressed back. I didn't run. I stepped away, stupidly slow, keeping my eyes on the seam until I was back in the bedroom. I shut the door. I put the dresser against it, while my wife watched with her hand to her mouth. We didn't talk about the way the door nudged once, politely, like someone waiting to be invited. At 2:13 a.m., one more text. No words. A photo of our attic. The angle only makes sense if you're standing on the ladder halfway up. Boxes. Old insulation. The far wall where the previous owner fell. Patched smooth. An address on a wire hanger. High collar. Pearl buttons. Not moving even though a strand of my wife's hair in a frame is lifted by a draft. The bag Lydia brought sits by our entryway where we left in the rush. I haven't opened it. I don't know if it's candy. I don't know if she ever left. Sometimes late, I hear that soft dress drag along the hall. When I check the children, they're fine, asleep, cheeks warm. Their curtains are always closed. Last night my daughter asked in the dark, if she were the same dress as the dead lady because she liked her, does that mean the dead lady likes us back? And before I could think of the right kind of lie to make that question go away, the attic door made a small happy sound, like a tongue clicking against teeth. Next story title. Our Halloween party guests refused to leave after they died at 3:17 a.m. I told everyone to go home. No one moved. The music was off. The fog machine was still bleeding out sweet plastic air that burned my throat. Cider had turned the kitchen floor into a tacky map that pulled at my shoes. Orange string lights buzzed like a hive. I clapped and did the fake host smile. All right, ghosts, last call. People looked at me and smiled too long. That unfocused, mask-slipping smile that starts after midnight and nothing good follows. A guy in a vampire cape raised his cup but didn't drink. The cup never tilted. The punch on his lip didn't drip. It just sat there like a sticker. Hey! I nudged him with the back of my hand. His arm swung and bumped my shoulder with the weight of wet laundry. He was colder than the room. In the corner, the fog machine coughed and the little red light blinked. I unplugged it. The fog kept coming anyway. Thinner now, curling over the coffee table, curling around a girl in a cat mask who kept laughing at a joke no one was still telling. The laugh looped. Same beat, same breath. I said my girlfriend's name. She didn't answer. She'd gone to bed hours ago after telling me to be nicer when I play bouncer. I felt that old argument sitting behind my eyes like pressure. I opened the window over the sink to air out the burnt sugar smell and got slapped by cold October air that smelled like wet leaves and metal. The exhaust fan over the stove hummed when I flicked it on. Its hum felt like relief, like the house could exhale. A draft ran over my hands, and the hairs lifted. I checked the thermostat. 68. Holding. The furnace had that cherry-warm smell people call cozy. It made the back of my tongue taste like pennies. Phone's away. Coat's on. I said, "Come on." Someone's phone chimed from inside a jacket tossed over a chair. A text ding and a banner lighting the screen. Be there in 10 from a number I knew belonged to the girl in the cat mask, the one still laughing in the living room. I checked the timestamp. 3:19 a.m., Jess? I said. She lifted the mask with 2 fingers, slow, like she was underwater. Mascara had dried beneath her eyes in clean lines, not smudged the way it should be at this hour. Her breath didn't fog the plastic. The carbon monoxide detector chirped a single high beat from the hallway ceiling. I looked up. It was the angry low battery chirp I'd been ignoring for a week. I'd pulled the batteries earlier, so the chirping wouldn't kill the vibe. Told myself I'd put them back after. The faceplate hung open like a mouth. Someone knocked on the front door with knuckles that hit bone. 2 slow, hard knocks. The sound came through the wood and through me. I went to the peephole. A neighbor in a robe stood on the porch, shifting from foot to foot, lips tight. Behind him, the street was empty and sharp under the streetlights. Leaves wrinkled into dark hands along the curb. I opened the door a crack. "I'll keep it down." "I called last time," he said, breath smoky in the cold. No one answered. "It's loud. It's late." He tipped his chin at the window. "Your people aren't moving." "Yeah, I'm trying." He looked past me and his mouth made a small O. "They sick." "They're fine." He swallowed. "Then why is your house still?" he asked, and his voice dropped like he'd stepped into a church by accident. He backed off the porch without waiting for me to answer. I closed the door and counted the lock clicks 2 carefully, like counting would make them thicker. The stereo light on the console glowed blue, even though the power was off. I could hear the faintest whisper of a song under everything. Not melody, not even a beat, just a little room tone you notice when a tiny speaker is listening for input. The vampire guy hadn't blinked. There was a tiny white nick on his bottom lip, where kids chew when they're drunk and trying to listen. No blood. His chest didn't lift. "Okay," I said to the room. My voice shook, and I made it louder to cover it. "Joke's over." "Out!" I touched the girl in the cat mask's hand, and her fingers collapsed around mine like dropped string. Cold. Not cold like ice. Cold like a counter that hasn't had human on it in a while. I flinched and her mask tilted, just slightly, as if something beneath it turned to follow the motion. In the hallway, my girlfriend appeared, hair smashed on one side, sleepy angry. "What are you doing?" she whispered, because when you're actually scared, you whisper. She looked at the living room, the table, the cups, the motionless shoulders, the fog that wasn't fog anymore, just air that didn't seem to want to leave, and her face drained in a way you always think is a figure of speech until you see it. "They won't go," I said. I sounded like a kid telling the teacher the door is stuck. The detector in the hall let out one long, sick beep like a flat line. The faceplate fell and hit the floor. Windows, I said. Open everything. We went around the house with fingers that didn't work right, wrestling swollen frames, throwing up sashes, letting the cold flood in, the fog thinned, the house inhaled, cider and perfume and latex and breath spilled out into the night. I dialed 911 and said words that felt stupid while I said them. They're not leaving. They're not breathing. They're not anything. The dispatcher said, "Stay on the line." He said, "Help is on the way." I could hear my own voice in the receiver, like it was someone else's. The sirens arrived a lifetime later, and also instantly. Blue light bounced off everything orange and made it all sick purple. Firefighters in gear moved past me with polite force. One of them touched my shoulder and asked when the party started how many were inside, whether the furnace had been serviced this year. "You feel dizzy?" he asked. Eyes steady on mine. "I feel awake," I said. "Too awake." He nodded like that told him something. They propped the door open with a boot and a wedge. The night came in, and the room didn't change. Paramedics came next and went person to person, fingers at necks, faces close, heads shaking. An officer took statements from air. The vampire guy's cup fell at last. It tipped, spilled, rolled in a straight line on its side toward the hallway like the floor had a slope I'd never noticed. It stopped at the carbon monoxide detector battery. They took our friends out one by one on orange boards. The boards flexed. I kept expecting someone to get angry, embarrassed, to sit up and blame me for ruining the bit. No one did. The officer with the notebook asked me to say the time again. 3:17, I said, and then felt like a liar because time had stretched into a rubber band and snapped back. Before dawn, the house emptied. The last paramedic paused in the doorway and looked at the fog machine still unplugged on the floor. "Don't plug that in again," she said, like it mattered. The neighbor stood at the edge of our walkway with his robe tight and his bare legs blue white. He watched the stretchers go with the same polite horror people bring to weddings they didn't want to attend. At 6:22, an investigator in a windbreaker told us words like combustion and venting and levels. He said gently that based on heat, based on lividity, based on science, most of them had been gone since around 1. "But they were here," I said. "They were here." My voice cracked on the last word, and I hated it. He didn't argue. "Sometimes," he said, and then stopped because sometimes what? We spent the morning with the windows open and coats on, hands around mugs we didn't drink from. The house made that ugly. Stripped sound it makes when it's empty of people. Fridge motor, pipes ticking, wind fingering the blinds. We waited for someone to tell us what to do. No one did. At 11:04, my phone lit up with a notification from the party group chat. Someone had gone live. The thumbnail was my living room. Orange lights. Blue stereo glow. No people. I tapped into it, and the screen showed the empty room like a real estate listing. The chat filled with, "And who's filming," and then slowed, then stopped. The live timer kept counting up. In the background, very faint, someone laughed, the same beat, the same breath, like a toy with batteries dying. We deleted the app. We turned off the router. The live kept going. The thumbnail stayed. The timer crawled. No viewers. Just live. By sunset, the smell was mostly gone except in the doorway, where people had paused to be carried out. The air there tastes sweet if you put your tongue on the back of your teeth by accident. We left the windows open anyway. At midnight, I heard a knock that belonged to Knuckles that hit bone. 2 slow, hard knocks. It came from inside this time, from the hallway, from under the attic or under the stairs or inside the walls. It's hard to tell once you know a house holds sound the way a lung holds air. I didn't open any more doors. I didn't go to the peephole. I just stood in the dark living room and watched the blue stereo light. It glowed, steady, And from the corner by the coffee table, from empty air that wasn't fog anymore, someone lifted a cup I couldn't see and said, "Way too kindly, so we feel good about it. One more song."